Time being 6 o'clock, I'm going to call this Board of Health meeting to order. Everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'd like to open up the public announcements. Announcements from the Health Department.
All right, so we are still doing boosters for anyone adults. We have Moderna. Appointments are available on our website. The appointment times are 9:45 to 12, Monday through Thursday. We are going from until the 23rd of December, and then the plan is to continue that after the holiday break. Boosters for 12 to 17, if they become clinically indicated and are starting to be offered, we'll offer them as soon as we can as well. The 5 to 11 Pfizer vaccine clinics are also here in Town Hall, 2:30 to 4:30, also through the 23rd of December, and we'll do those after if we can, if we have enough. If anybody needs an appointment, they are on the website. Health Department, right-hand corner, news and announcements. Can't miss it. If you have any problems, get an appointment, give us a call, or if you have problems on the computers and you need help with them, give us a call. And we officially submitted the Public Health Excellence Grant for shared services with our partners Avon, Stoughton, Whitman, and Brockman. Hopefully we'll have funding for that after the first of the year. Our first position for that will be hiring a grant administrator, hopefully by the middle of January, or at least if all things go according to plan and we get funding for that. Current cases in town is 92. Our average age is 38.3. It's bringing our total cases to about 232,637. Vaccination positivity rate was, the test positivity rate was 6.5. Our vaccination rate for who have at least had one shot is almost 72. It's on the back page of this document that I gave you. The back of the third page, excuse me. Of eligible and of all. We're almost at 68 and almost at 64. That's all I got.
Thank you, Marty. Yep, Melissa.
Do you have data on hospitalizations in comparison to that?
I did. It will be, it's a lagging indicator of the positive cases. We talked about that. It's on the links in the email that I sent.
Okay.
What was that, Friday?
Okay.
And I can send it to you after the meeting if you need it.
No.
Do we have any percentages for all these people here that are not included?
Sure.
In the email for us?
If you want to know, they can send me an email. I'll happily provide it. It's also on the Massachusetts COVID dashboard. We have about, I believe it's 1,100 people hospitalized right now. Don't quote me, but it's on the website.
1,100 for Abington?
No, 1,100 for the state.
So they don't have
Something
any-
like that. You'd have to look it up. I don't want to say the number and be wrong. It's on the COVID dashboard.
And the spreadsheet that we have here is available on the town website, right?
If anybody wants it, they can pull it up, or I can send it to them.
So this is town specific. We still don't have death and hospitalization numbers for
No.
Abington alone?
Not on there.
Because then, to me, this paints a very gray picture to the town at least.
Okay.
Is there a way we can get that information?
Get what? What
More
specific?
town-specific deaths, hospitalizations, asymptomatic to symptomatic?
Well, we're not going to do asymptomatic and symptomatic cases because it doesn't matter. A case that is positive still has to isolate. And we can talk about hospitalizations in town and deaths in town, but it's not something
I'm not
We're gonna
asking
report.
for, because they're asymptomatic, that they don't have to. That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking for is that information so that the people in the town can make their own decisions.
to isolate or not.
Not to isolate, to take extra precautions.
See, the thing is, a positive case, regardless of symptomatic or asymptomatic, still has to isolate. So it's inappropriate for me to put that on there. In the office, we have a case file on every positive case in town. So we do know who's positive, what symptoms they've had, how long they've had symptoms, when the symptoms cleared up, when they can go back to work. putting that on there is very specific to each case. So we're just not gonna do that for the time being.
I just feel that would be town information, public information, that they should have the right to know that.
Well, medical information is never public information, and since the state's not reporting that, we're just not gonna do that either.
It's just numbers.
It's numbers. I'm not asking for names and addresses, I'm asking for numbers, data.
Okay. Gotcha. Heard.
So I have a question. On the partially vaccinated, I was just kind of curious, and this is a finger in the pulse question, and if we have to table it for another time, that's fine. But the partially vaccinated, is that a very stagnant number, or do we generally see those that are partially vaccinated roll over to fully
It's
vaccinated?
usually lower than that. The children who are now able to get vaccinated are still, some of them haven't been, the time hasn't cleared for them to get their second shot. So that
Okay.
number will likely decline over the next couple of weeks as those kids get their second dose.
That makes perfect sense to me, thank you.
No problem.
Monty, one of the things is I did notice that the 20 to 29-year-olds kind of seem to be the lowest category as far as the percentage of people vaccinated. Have other towns had like any success in how to reach out to the 20 to 29-year-olds to?
I don't know. I did reach out to the Academic Public Health Corps today to see if they would be willing to come in specifically for messaging for that age group and for our large Portuguese-speaking population. So hopefully we'll have more outreach and community messaging in the very near future.
Right.
And that's not just Abington, that's
No.
statewide, some would say countrywide.
Right. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions for Marty?
No, thank you.
All right. Moving on then to our next agenda item. That is the update on the PFAS 6 water violation. Joe, I'm going to invite you up to chat with us, give us a little update.
So just to give you a little background, I don't know how familiar you are with the Abington Rockland Joint Water. We have 3 water sources that feed both towns, also Hanson and Pembroke. Our main treatment plant is down in Pembroke, Great Sandy Bottom Pond. Our transmission line comes up over Pembroke through Hanson. We have customers off that line also. We have a Hingham Street Reservoir in Rockland, which is over by the Home Depot. Before you get to Home Depot, where the hotels are, it sits out in the back. In Abington, we have Myers Ave, which are groundwater wells. We have 3 wells that are active, one that we're getting active, well number 4. So originally, when we were trying to get well number 4 activated, we had to do a pump test, and this was before the regulation for PFAS went from 70 down to 20. We had a PFAS level on the well at 30. So instead of activating that well, we petitioned DEP. We did a pilot program using carbon filters in our treatment plant. That's been running for a year. The PFAS levels are at like 3. So it's working excellent. So the next phase of that is we got a grant for $150,000 to design the new filter system, which we're going to put in. It'll actually be 2 carbon filters running through the 4 filters that we have there, the green sand filters. Myers Ave, we have no problem. It's up and running. It's just the redundancy that the DEP wants. Our Pembroke plant tested fine. We're fine with that. The Hingham Street Reservoir was the one that we have the issue with. So our short-term goal with the engineers and working with DEP, we try to put a carbon-activated slurry, which we mix it up and almost makes like a watery slurry. We inject that into the intake pipe in the reservoir so it has time to work. That was in I'm going to say the beginning of July. After the months that we were using it, it's just not doing what we hoped it would do. So DEP told us you might as well stop injecting it. Number 1, it was costing us $10,000 a month, and number 2, it wasn't working. So we have right now a 2-phase plan in place for the Hingham Street Reservoir. Phase 1 is to buy to granulated activated carbon filters, which are 12 feet in diameter, 20 feet in diameter by 12 feet high. We can get 2 of them in a temporary building, get the plant up so it meets regulations. That right now, we're working with the town of Rockland and the town of Abington to secure some of the American Rescue Plan money, which is gonna be, hopefully, we're looking at $700,000 from each town. We have $500,000. To get phase 1 up and running, it's just gonna be just under $2 million. The final phase for the Hingham Street Reservoir, DEP, meeting with DEP and our engineers, they want 6 of these filters, which is gonna require a whole new building just to house these filters. We'll go through our original treatment process, through our original plant. It's gonna go out through all these carbon filters and then back out into the system. By the time that's said and done, you're talking over $20 million. So that's basic. We have applied for the state revolving fund money. We probably won't know that till at least January. That just, if our project is eligible, we can borrow the money at 0 or 2% interest. To maybe the town of Abington to feel a little better, 99.9% of Abington's water comes from Myers Ave and Sandy Bottom down in Pembroke. So you're really not getting the, the PFAS water. So our test results, which is another issue, I think when DEP dropped this from 70 down to 20, I think they thought it was going to be in spotty areas around the state, and it's just overwhelming them. Everybody has it. It's not something we caused, it's something we're just trying to fix. So, I mean, we do samples. Our first quarter samples was 23. The limit's 20. So they say this is like 1 drop of contamination into 16 million gallons of water, 1 part per trillion. Quarter 2, we were right at the 20. We didn't have to send out notifications. Quarter 3, we're at 24. So it's this, every quarter, every 4 months, we have to send out notification that we're over. It's still the same problem that we had. And, just for some of the science, on 9/29, our September sample come back at the highest we've ever had at 29. When we took our November sample, our October sample, came back the lowest we've ever had at 17, and we haven't done anything. There's an issue that we've been having with, there's only a certain number of laboratories that do the testing, how accurate's the testing. They say it's a 30% either way. So we could be 30% higher, we could be 30% lower. That's another major issue. We petitioned DEP on this question and they have no answers. So, that being said, we do have the water spigot down at our office to give water out to, they call the vulnerable group. We test that once a month. It's 3 parts per trillion, well below what we're supposed to have, and basically that's our water coming out of our Myers Ave and our Pembroke treatment plant. So it is. So right now the timeline.
Sorry. What's the federal limit?
Federal is the 20.
Is it?
Yeah. I think they all lowered it. I mean, some states have 0, which I don't see how anybody's ever going to achieve that.
Joe, do you have a contact if people are concerned about?
Yep, it's all on the website. It's in the letter. My assistant superintendent, Crystal Cameron, and Tom Royal, who's the primary treatment operator, they can answer all the technical questions. But we find that a lot of people that call, they're a little bit more relieved after they talk to somebody instead of looking at it Facebook and how that works. So we encourage people to call. You might not get a call back that day, but you'll get a call back within, next couple of days or whatever. Naturally, when we sent the cards out, we're kind of overwhelmed with the calls, so it took a while to get back. But basically, we're doing as much as we can, as fast as we can. It all relies on, like everything, the money that we can get in. I have no problem borrowing money, which to get this thing rolling. But even at phase 1, if we secure the ARPA money, There's so many towns dealing with this right now. It's a supply and demand problem, just like everything else. When this first started back in July, we priced out those 2 tanks, and they were gonna be $350,000 to buy 2 of them. Right now, they're only $600,000. Steel's gone up, they can't get product, supply and demand. So, and even when this is up and running, so our plant down in Myers Ave, the filter we have is a carbon activated filter. The carbon in that filter lasted us 9 months. It was $30,000 to replace it. So you're gonna have to, now if you have 2 there and 6 at Hingham Street, that's all gonna be figured into a budget, So, that's an extra $250,000 a year just for maintenance,
So Joe, you mentioned that people can get water from the spigot, and the address is on Central?
366 Center Ave,
Center
right after the Target.
Right, okay.
Yep.
And if everything went perfectly fine, with the full project,
Yep.
your timeline, would it be like probably 2 or 3 years?
2 anyways.
2 years?
Yeah, hopefully we can get phase 1 running within, like right now, we actually had a meeting last week with the engineers who are dealing with 2 companies, Calgon and TIG, that make these filters. And if we ordered them today, it's almost 8 months out just to get the filter. We can get all the construction side of it done, the buildings and everything, if we knew they were coming. I can't pull the trigger until I have financing to pull the trigger.
Is this, go ahead, Melissa, I'm sorry.
Is there anything the Board of Health can do to support you, like write a letter of support for some of the grants or anything like that?
Actually, we just got a grant for the design, so if I do need help, I'm sure I can reach out to Marty, and anything you guys can do would be a great help. But right now, I actually have a meeting with the town of Rockland tomorrow for the APA, and there's a debate on whether Plymouth County's gonna make us go in front of town meeting to give the money or not, so that now we're waiting until April if that happens, unless we have a special town meeting.
So is your plan to go to the annual town meeting in April and get the funding at least for the first phase?
Exactly.
Okay.
Hopefully, if state revolving fund money comes through, we have 2 options. I hate to go out and borrow the total amount of money if there's grants out there that I can get money.
Right.
And if we have the money, they're gonna say, well, you already have a funding source. So hopefully we can get the money sooner than later through the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan, and at least get our phase 1 up and running. That'll cut the price, and then we go from there. So chances are, so the first sample of our last quarter was 17, so if we can stay below the 20, we won't have to send out the notices the next quarter, but they're gonna keep continuing until this thing's fit. The town of Easton's been doing it for 2 years. We're not gonna be doing it for 2 years. If our plan falls into place.
Andrew, do you?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. The PFAS6 is like an ingredient
Yep,
that we put into the town's water supply,
we didn't personally put it
but
in.
we don't personally put it in.
It's made, this ingredient it's in everything. It's in anything fire retardant, children's pajamas, children's clothes, anything non-stick, your non-stick pans. It was always in takeout containers, the styrofoam takeout containers, any manufacturing plants. So what the DEP is actually looking at, this contamination you can't say where it came from. We got the air base that's right over by Hingham Street Reservoir. We got where Home Depot used to be the Boston Whaler.
Factory.
These are sites. Once it gets into the aquifer, into the groundwater, it travels, but it doesn't disappear. It will, they call, one of the cures DEP lets you do is blend the water. If you had 3 wells, one was contaminated, you could blend all 3 wells as long as it was below the 20 and still put it out there. So it's not something that we personally did or anybody did, but we have to cure the problem.
Yes, absolutely, because I was completely unaware of this whole situation until I received a Facebook message from this gentleman in town, and I just want to know, I started looking into it, and this gentleman is the one that put me onto it that this PFAS6 is the main contaminant and causes reproductive issues, including ovarian and testicular cancer and infertility. There have been multiple lawsuits against towns for deaths as a result of long-term consumption.
75 years consumption.
That was gonna be my question, the 20.
I don't know if you saw this on the website. Everything's really explained well in the letter. DEP makes us send this, they review the letter, basically gave us a template to send out.
I work site utilities,
Mhm.
so I've seen the inside of a water main, and it's absolutely disgusting, so I can only imagine anything else.
Yeah, it's
That
nothing
comes
that
in
we
there.
have in our water mains. It's coming out of the ground, out of the aquifer, in the
Okay.
ground. That's why it's all over the state,
Mhm.
you know?
Christine?
Joe, because the language and the way this is structured, it is, to the layman reading this, not Googling along,
Yeah.
it does make it a little hard to kind of understand, like, what is 20 parts per billion, and at what point does it become, you know, dangerous and a hazard? Can you
Yeah.
kind of, and this might save you some phone calls, would you be able to kind of articulate sort of the layman's explanation of the current levels and what the danger is? You said, for example, over 75 years.
Yeah.
right?
They say that it's basically one drop of this in 16 million gallons of water.
16
16
millions?
million gallons of water
Okay.
is parts per trillion. I'm
And the-
not a doctor, I don't know how it affects the bodies or whatever.
Right,
So the original amount was 70 parts per trillion.
and that was like in
Forever.
2016 before
Yeah.
Massachusetts
I
started
mean, that's
regulating.
been the regulation forever.
Right,
DEP lowered the regulation starting in April. We started our testing early in December to make sure, when we found out, we legally didn't have, not legally, but
mhm,
weren't obligated to test until April 1st. We had already finished our first quarter by then, and we were over. So, you know, we wanted to be proactive and get out in front, because we knew once they lowered the standard,
mhm,
the whole, everybody kind of knew that it's going to be tough to hit that standard. Not that we ever tested for PFAS, just by, you know, like the town of Easton, then they just put a $60 million treatment plan in to treat this. They had to do it. They had the same problem we did. They were designing new wells, and that's when the PFAS flew, but they were almost 200 parts per trillion.
so to kind of reframe it, to make sure I'm understanding, it sounds like the prior regulation standards in 2016 were parts per trillion,
Correct.
and that was approved or by the
Seven.
EPA,
Yeah.
and then they lowered it to parts per billion. We were.
No,
for-
it's still parts per trillion. They
Parts
just
per trillion.
lowered the number from 70 parts per trillion to 20 parts per trillion.
And then and it sounds like you guys were actually proactively testing to meet that deadline.
Correct.
Okay,
So, so 20 parts per trillion, so we're 23, 20, and 24 our last 4 quarters. So we are over, but, you know, it's not like some towns have 200 or 300 parts per, you know.
mhm,
Even if we're under the 20, DEP wants an active plan to prove that we can stay under 10 consistently. So that's our goal, to bring it, our goal is to get to 0.
mhm,
When you activate these carbon filters, at the beginning you probably are at 0. And what they do, they have 3 sample points up the filter, 25, 75, and 100. Once you get past the 75 and you have 10 parts per trillion, that tells you now it's time to replace all the media, so you don't exceed the limit.
And my last question, prior to this, I don't know if it's EPA or the state, but prior to the standard for safety getting lowered, were we in compliance?
Absolutely. We actually never tested for PFAS.
Oh, I understand,
So it
you said
wasn't-
that earlier, thank you.
Actually, with the 70 parts per trillion, we did test for PFAS.
Uh-huh,
If you, the original laboratories, when we did our yearly test, if you were under 30, it would
Mhm.
say non-detected.
okay,
So then they lowered it down to the 20, so now they're testing all the way down to 0.
okay. Thank
So
you, I appreciate it.
All our indication, we were non-detectable forever when we were
Mhm.
doing it when it was 70 parts per trillion, because we were always under the 30.
All right, thank you so much, Joe.
Any other questions to the board? No? Joe, thank you for coming. Really
No
appreciate
problem. Thank you.
Very informative, thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Again, if anybody has questions, they can reach out to the Abington Rockland Joint Waterworks. Like Joe said, they'd be happy to chat with you about this. Okay. Our next agenda item is COVID-19 safety measures. I just want to go over a couple things before we begin on that discussion. So this item is on the agenda based on the fact that last discussion we had about any safety measures was a trigger of any positivity over 5%. As Marty said, we're at 6.5%. So that's why that's on the agenda again. I will be allowing time for public comment during this period after the board has some discussion and we hear from Marty and things like that. I do ask when that time comes, I recognize you. You can sit at the chair here, state your name and address, and then proceed to comment what you'd like to comment. This is public comment, not public question and answer, so we will not answer everything that somebody says when they come up. Marty may not answer everything that comes up. This is a comment section. We're not going to debate with the audience. That is all that I had to preface that, so I'm going to open it up to Marty about any recommendations or such from the health department.
So you all read all of the emails that I've sent out. If we're being just for clarity, right now, I think it's a bad idea to mandate anything in the town when our focus should be on vaccinating as many possible who are people who are eligible as we can. I think an advisory is probably a good idea, saying if you're in a crowded space or if it's highly recommended that you wear a mask in accordance with the public health advisory and the CDC and the DPH guidelines. Undue burden on not only us, but everyone in town. And I think it will distract unnecessarily from our vaccination, contact tracing, and other mitigation efforts like messaging and education. I think those should be our goals, personally. And if it continues to climb, reconsider. But right now, I think that should be our goal. Vaccination, contact tracing, education, messaging, and that. The waters are already too muddy, so I don't think we need to muddy them anymore. That's my personal recommendation.
Thank you, Marty. Any other discussion from the board on this?
For advisories, have you kind of thought about maybe what type of advisories the health department might be thinking about at this time, or haven't gone there yet?
I would throw that back at the board as to what your desire would be to.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to ask me what my recommendation for the advisory was, it would be we recommend mask use in all public spaces inside,
Right.
as it was, I don't know, about a year and a half ago. Anything outside of that,
But this
Probably.
would be a advisory, not a mandate.
right.
Okay.
We highly recommend if you're in a public space, especially indoors with a lot of people, that you wear a mask.
And is this advisory? I think you said this, but this advisory would be in compliance with the Department of Health
And the CDC.
regulations and CDC.
And because of Plymouth County's current rates.
Okay.
Do you have any insight into maybe the nature of how transmission is occurring in town at all? Or is that kind of hard to say?
It's really hard to say intuitively. It appears to be more household spread than anything else. Like if I could point a finger to a bunch of events that are causing a bunch of spread, I would. But it's just not that simple. Each case is unique, each outbreak, each cluster is unique. Which is why I'm saying I think an advisory is probably sufficient right now and continue to monitor. And if it goes higher, then I'll let you know and do another meeting.
Okay. Anybody else have any discussion before I open the floor?
Personally, I would like to hear public comment before having a discussion.
Okay.
I believe that's,
Yeah, I just want to make sure that
Your call,
they hear
but-
enough of that's on our mind before we move forward with that. But if I hear nothing else, I'll open the floor for public comment. If I ask you, just raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Yep.
I didn't even know I was gonna do that first. Hi, I'm Rayla Campbell.
Kayla?
Rayla.
Oh, Rayla, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My ears.
No problem. So, basically, mandates of any
Sorry, your address, please?
Oh, 397 High Street. I'm actually down the street in Whitman. So Whitman, Abington line. Half my property is in Abington, so I feel free to come here and express my beliefs and what I feel, and the other half of my property is in Whitman. And I also have 3 small children that I homeschool, and I'm running for Secretary of State. Hi, everyone. So when we're talking about mandates and we're talking about masks, do you know the damage that it does to the children? Have you seen the damage that it's done to the children? Social, emotional, not able to understand, seeing. So exactly, the way they breathe. So when we're talking about what the damage that these mandates have already done to our economy, to our businesses, that should be a priority. How many businesses have shut their doors and can't open their doors again? How many children, especially children with disabilities, have suffered because of these mandates? Not to mention, I'm pretty sure that we freed ourselves from England, so nobody should be mandating anything. It's about choice. We've always been about choice. And I think we need to be allowing us free Americans that choice. And same thing with businesses. Government should never mandate anything. Government needs to keep their eyes on what they should be doing and out of our children's lives, out of our homes, out of our bodies. So when you're talking about these making masks a requirement, do you know what people have to deal with when they have to put on a mask and go in there? Oh, then you get yelled at for not wearing your mask. I was shunned by everybody. Don't, you gotta wear your mask. You're gonna get somebody sick. I'm perfectly healthy. If you are nervous, then you put on your China mask. But don't force it to be put on us. It says directly on it, and we all know that OSHA has it out there, that the masks don't work. And yet, you still want to put this fear on people and instilling this behavior. Why are you doing that? Why aren't you allowing people to be free in America? You should be focused on the problems in the economy that are happening. You should be focused on the fact that our kids are graduating with a 6th grade education level. Those are priorities. You should be focused on getting more businesses in here, bringing manufacturing back here. Those are priorities. Mask mandates because it's flu season, and anybody who gets the flu shot, guess what? They test positive for COVID. So, is it COVID or is it flu? And do you not have choice with the flu shot? Or do you mandate the flu shot? We're about choice and freedom, and we need to be allowing us to have those choices and freedoms. And as Board of Health should understand the ramifications of what's happening. And the fact that this is a variant now going on from a supposed vaccination, that we can change the name of vaccination, fully vaccinated, or what's vaccinated. Vaccines prevent, they don't cause. Allow people their freedoms, their choice. Allow the businesses their freedoms, their choices. Because that is what is going to make this country thrive again. And you want to stop with COVID? We've already gotten herd immunity. Dr. Fauci said so himself. But we don't have immunity from the variant because normally this is done in a lab, tested on animals. Every single animal has died. Every single one. Think about that. Now you're the guinea pigs. And now you want to follow people.
If I may, the agenda item in hand is whether or not we need to take certain safety measures for Abington. And
Right.
I feel like we're getting a little bit off track of
No,
specifically
absolutely not. The business in Abington, do you think they don't suffer?
So that's not what I'm saying right now. I'm just saying I want to focus on are certain safety measures effective for Abington, not whether or not these things are effective in general. That's not what we're talking
Well,
about.
they're not effective at all. And when you're talking about Abington, is that effective in Abington for people as well?
So we're
Same thing with the supermarket.
we are talking about tonight whether or not the safety measures we have taken in the past need to be taken again. That's what we're talking about, not the effectiveness of those
Overreach.
things.
So if the overreach needs to happen again,
I
is that what you're
appreciate
saying?
your comment. I'm going to ask that we move on to somebody else. Thank
Yeah, okay. Make America great again. We will.
Okay. you. Yes, sir.
You writing down addresses? My name is Gary Innes. I live at 397 Cedar Street in Hanover. I'm running for state senate. Marty, what is your position?
Sorry?
What is your position, sir?
I'm the health director for the town and inspection services director.
And you've encouraged them to put off the mandate, is that correct?
Yeah, I've encouraged the use of an advisory as opposed to a mandate so we can focus our efforts on vaccination.
I agree 100%. Thank you.
Cheers.
I'm just gonna say one thing. I'm gonna ask also, I have no problem keeping this public comment period open for more comments. Can I please have Abington residents coming up to the mic that really want to encourage that first? It's Abington Board of Health meeting. Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna stand because I want to get back to people.
Did you have something you wanted to say before?
Yes, and I apologize for interrupting the discussion. I was wondering if our public commentators, and this is more, I'm not directing, I'm just asking out of consideration. We do have Chinese American residents in our town. I was wondering if we might be okay with addressing, if we do want to identify like the country of China, maybe we could simply say the country of China rather
Our
than
Chinese
China.
Americans are on our side.
I'm just asking for a consideration that maybe we could just,
Alright.
it makes me uncomfortable as a board member for this type of language. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Christina.
Jennifer McLeod.
Just the mic's over here, just want to stand up.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
just
Just want to make sure everyone can hear you.
sideways.
you.
Jennifer McLeod, 468 Randolph Street. I'm not specifically referring to the masks tonight because, while I am thankful that Marty has put this off, so I don't need to, but my comments are more directed because I can't make comments anywhere else. So this is a public forum. This is the only place I can make them. So I just have some open-ended questions. I know you're not going to answer them, but so if this shot is safe and effective, it should speak for itself. Unfortunately, the shots aren't working to stop the spread, and many people are suffering adverse reactions from it. Let's discuss those that are still getting COVID after receiving their second and now third shots. Why are we exclusively pushing something that isn't working? Let's discuss adverse reactions. If the adverse reactions post a few weeks ago shows us anything, is that people in this town are hurting and they are being silenced by the health department because they can't comment on the posts, the propaganda that is constantly pushed out by the health department with no recourse, no way to contact them on the post and comment so that others can see that the information is not complete that the Abington Health Department is sharing. It is only from the CDC. They will accept no other information, even verified things. I have sent them information. All I get back is the CDC says. I have sent them information months ago about the Comirnaty virus, the vaccine, that it is not available in the United States. It is approved, it's the only, it's the Pfizer approved one. It's not available in the United States. I sent that to the health director. I was told that I was confused. Well, lo and behold, an article just comes out that the DOD, a federal judge, put a stay on it because the DOD, you can't mandate something that is an EU, and there's no Comirnaty vaccine in the United States being given out. It is under it's EU authorization in the United States. That's all there is available. So I sent that out. I was told it's not CDC. Lo and behold, a federal judge puts a stay on it. So that proved out to be true. Why doesn't our health department want the reality of the vaccine injuries to be heard? Let the people speak, and maybe we won't wonder why our own health department doesn't allow comments on their posts, but markets this new mRNA technology directly to kids using television characters and to adults with no transparency. Maybe people should hear why the creator of the mRNA technology, Dr. Robert Malone, is against its use and is warning people about it. Maybe people should hear the studies from Israel and the UK about how the majority of those dying from COVID are fully vaccinated. And those are studies that have come out. They are data. I know it might not say CDC on it, but it is still data that is out there. There's so much information out there, and neither the media nor the government agencies want people to hear. Why? Leadership that suppresses information for the good of the people should be challenged and questioned. Do we want a solution to this, or do we want to continue letting our government agencies, town agencies, force things on us and think for us with no recourse when we get hurt, other than ridicule and dismissal? That's not who we are as a town, nor who we've ever been. People deserve to be heard, and their experiences are valid. New studies need to be considered, even when they contradict the official narrative of the CDC and Fauci. Let's face this next phase together as a community, unified and fully informed. Stop suppressing the information, stop limiting comments, or stop posting your propaganda. You don't want us to comment, don't post it. I have studies, I can pass them out, I've highlighted parts, they're from your PubMed, which the NIH uses, so, you
Thank
know.
you. Marty, is there anything, as the health department was directly, commented on?
This
you wanna
is
say?
public comment. If anybody wants to contact me and have a conversation about this, you know where I'm at. My door is always
Why
open.
can't we comment
We have
publicly?
So
had an
this is
email
not,
exchange
this is not an exchange.
several times. If you would like to do that, please do. You're always welcome.
I
My door
have.
is always open. We've had exchanges in
We
the past.
have, but why can't the public hear the other side, Marty? Why won't you let it be out there? Why are you afraid?
This
I
is
don't
not the
exactly
place for this.
understand.
This is
Talk to
not,
me.
I understand, but both parties, this is not the place for this.
Anybody that would
We-
like to discuss this can come by the office and we can have a real
Yeah,
conversation.
if you have an issue with the health department, you need to contact the health department, because this is not the place for that. I understand that, but
We've had conversations.
our,
I just
our
want it
board,
out there publicly for everyone to hear. That's all I said.
our board meeting is not the place for that.
That's fine.
That's all
Well,
I'm
it's on
asking.
TV now, so
Just for the
it's
record
all-
though, the concern is no comments on our Facebook post?
Yes,
That-
why are you
okay.
pushing propaganda without the ability for the town to respond with full disclosure of what's going on with this vaccine? You're exclusively posting
So,
one
so
side.
as we go through these public comment periods, if there are things you need to address to any individual on this board right now, or the health director, you need to do it through the chair. So, we are not gonna be individually talking to people like this. This is not an appropriate
I was
place for that.
just responding.
I understand, this is a point for the future, if other people wanna comment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I thought you were, okay. Are there any other public comments?
Oh, yeah. So I'm just gonna keep it pretty short, but I can't be quiet about it anymore.
Yeah, just mind sitting here so we can hear you. and,
I'd rather stand.
All right, yeah,
to be
just
heard.
as we can get the proximity, name and address for the record.
My name is Elijah Christ. I live at 45 Walnut Street in Abington. I have 2 kids and a wife in this town. My kids I've taken out of public school because my wife and I decided it was more important that they not be subjected to the trauma that we were beginning to see the effects of. We wanted an element of control, we wanted an element of choice. I'd like to speak briefly about a few things, and I'm gonna jump kind of all over the place, but just for the record, I'm a licensed master plumber. I have a background in indoor air quality. The masks are laughable. When you understand how small particles, very small particles move through air, it's frustrating to see people wear them. It's frustrating to see people passionate about them. They don't work the way that you think that they do. And for anybody that wants to test this, I suggest you take one of the blue masks and press it over your mouth and try breathing through it. Air does not pass through that blue membrane. It's not a filter, it's a barrier. For an aerosolized virus, it is leaving the sides of your masks as fast as you're breathing, and if it wasn't, you would be turning blue and falling over. I'm probably the only person in the room who has installed an air filter in the last 72 hours. Moving on. I appreciate that you want to do something about COVID. I appreciate that that's a concern for many of you, but you've got to understand, it's not a matter of vaccine outreach. We know the risk that we're taking, and we've chosen not to take that risk. I've chosen not to put my children at that risk. We've all, in my house, we've had COVID. It wasn't that bad. We isolated. We stayed away from the public. Nobody that we knew picked it up. Coincidentally, the person that I most likely contacted it from, because I spent 72 hours driving to the state of Iowa with him, was fully vaccinated, called me 2 days afterwards and said, hey, I posted positive for a COVID test. And lo and behold, I contracted it next. It wasn't that bad. We dealt with it. And, moving forward, I guess what I'd like to say, I'd like to hear some discussion about natural immunity, people who have had it. I'd like to see less assumption that those of us who are choosing not to have the vaccine done are just some ignorant rubes that don't know what we're doing. I'd like some serious and honest discussion about the face masks, and more importantly, more than really anything that I just said, I'd like to discuss health. Our kids are overweight. They're stressed out. Addiction is going through the roof. We've got massive problems in this town, and a lot of it has to do with what our overreaction to COVID was. So, just some food for thought, some things that I've been thinking about, some things I'd really like the discussion to start considering. I was thrilled to hear the discussion about our water. I mean, that's near and dear to my heart. We can't say we can drink the water in Abington, but who wants to? You know, these are the things that we need to be focusing on. I'm glad to have the chance to talk tonight. Thanks, guys, for listening.
In the interest of time, we do have other things to get to the agenda tonight. I'll allow one or two more, so is there anybody else who'd like to make any comment? State your name and address for the record when you get up there.
My name's Nicole Emery. I'm at 16 Pond Street in Abington. I'm just going to kind of wing it. I didn't really write anything out before me, but since it was on the agenda talking about the COVID safety measures, I know Andrew had asked, and I actually was wondering why we don't have the numbers reflective of Abington for mortality rate, hospitalizations, things like that, when we're going to talk about increasing safety measures. It is a respiratory illness. It's probably not going to go anywhere. We know in these months that respiratory illness does this. I'm also a nurse at a large Boston hospital. I work with immunocompromised patients. I worked all through COVID, so I'm familiar with this world. I'm just wondering if those types of things are being taken into consideration when discussing increasing safety measures, or is it just test positivity rate? Is that all that's being looked at? And if you have those numbers with reflective of Abington mortality or deaths, hospitalizations, could it be made available publicly? I mean, we don't need the people's information, but if you have that information, it would be nice for everybody to see it. So I was interested in that, but it kind of got answered when you first spoke, because if this does get talked about again, there are lots of businesses in our town that will plummet again, will be affected, because I know I personally will not continue to go in places in this town if I have to wear a mask, or if I have to put a mask on my children. I just won't. And unfortunately, I feel very sad saying that for people that have a business in Abington, but it's what will happen. And I also know that I do think when used properly, masks do work in a hospital setting, in the proper setting, but the way that people in the community are wearing them and the way they're being used in schools is not proper. In the hospital, in oncology, when we use a mask, we take it off, we throw it away, we get a new one. You would never go into a patient's room wearing the same mask you wore 5 minutes before and hung on a rearview mirror, and then go into that patient's room again with that dirty mask. In the hospital, when we saw people getting COVID from coworkers or whoever, or patients, we would go up gowned in 50 layers of PPE. We know we didn't go and get COVID from the patient actually coughing on us in the room. What would happen is they probably coughed on something, we come out of the room, you touch this, you touch that, you touch your mask, and then you go touch a keyboard, and then someone else just touches the keyboard, which is what's happening probably in the community, right? Somebody touches their dirty mask, or like in school, they touch their mask, they put it on their desk. It seems to me like they could possibly be worsening things depending on how they're being used. People are constantly reusing their same dirty mask. It's got saliva all over it and always touching it. That's really all I have to say about that. I also wanted to make a comment about the Facebook page. I do think
That's not on the agenda tonight. We're not going to talk about that.
Okay, well, that's my comment, is that if things from Abington are going to be posted, people should be able to comment. I scrolled through the Board of Health pages for 50 other towns while sitting right there, Not one page that I came across turns out commenting from their residents.
That is not on our agenda tonight. If you have an issue with that, I suggest you
Okay,
talk to the
well,
health department. Thank you.
And lastly, Marty, you work for our town, right? You work for us. Sometimes when people are in a position of yours, you forget who you work for.
All right, can we address
Yes.
through the chair, please?
I'm sorry? Okay.
Address through me.
Marty can leave his attitude and arrogance at the door.
Thank you for
because at the
speaking.
beginning-
We
at the
are not
beginning-
doing that. We're not attacking
Okay.
our staff members. All right.
How you first came in and spoke to Andrew for our entire community to see is embarrassing.
Ma'am, please, the chair's
Let her
trying to help.
It's a comment.
It's a comment, but we are not allowing comments that are going to attack our staff members.
I'm not attacking, I'm telling you as a,
So
I'm telling you as a resident, it is embarrassing.
Ma'am, could you maybe address it to Aaron?
Aaron,
So-
it is embarrassing as a resident.
I understand that, but you are directly mentioning that our health director has done one thing or another in a negative light, and that's not how we're going to handle this conversation right now.
It's a censored public comment?
It's not a censored public comment. But this is a privilege that we are providing to the public to talk about. And that is well documented in open meeting law. This is a privilege for you guys to have engaged in this conversation. We are opening this up so we can hear some of the things you have to say.
Right.
But there are certain things, such as attacking our staff members, that we are not going to allow.
I'm
Okay.
sorry if you feel attacked, but it's just the truth that
I-
it's embarrassing.
I appreciate your comments tonight. I'm going to ask that you please return to your seat. Thank you.
Okay.
Wow. Wow.
All
You're awesome. Wow. Wow. A privilege.
All right, public comment is closed for the evening. I'm going to reopen the discussion back to the board for this topic.
I'll start.
Yep.
I have a huge issue even with putting an advisory out there for a few reasons. Mainly, there are going to be businesses that feel, because it's coming from the Board of Health or Health Department, that, yes, it's an advisory and not a mandate, that they still have to require masks, which is still going to hurt Abington businesses, as many people will not shop there because they are requiring that. And as far as the masks go, personally, my two stepkids go to school in this town, and when the school required them to do that, we looked at exemptions for them because we didn't feel that kids should have to wear the masks. And my 9-year-old stepdaughter, who has severe anxiety and mental instability issues, broke down, screaming and begging me and my wife not to get this for her, that she didn't want to stick out like a sore thumb. I feel Abington businesses and Abington residents' mental health are way more important than this advisory, because it is a gray area between an advisory and a mandate.
I would like to respond to that for the purpose of discussion. I understand that the school mask mandate is a very polarizing issue, and some families have been much more deeply affected than others. You can't really put out a regulation and expect it's going to affect everybody the same. One of the realities of this topic specifically is that this Board of Health that meets today, and our authority, we're not the source of authority on the mask mandates in the school system. That does come from the school systems, and I might get the acronym wrong, I think it's the DESE.
DESE, yeah, DESE, yeah.
Of which we don't have influence or authority towards or over. So it's a really empathetic comment that you're making, and it's really sad to hear how it's affected your personal family, because I feel like for every person that brings up a story like yours, there's 10 other people that don't get an opportunity to speak. Our Board of Health meeting tonight, our authority and our influence doesn't cover that specific situation. It is, unfortunately, the most appropriate channel for that is the school system that put that into place. So it's a sad situation. I don't believe this board has the authority to mediate it, though.
I understand that this board doesn't have authority to regulate what happens in the school. I'm just trying to let the board know where my head is at with a mask advisory that masks in any facet, I don't believe work.
I think the communication on an advisory versus a mandate, now that we've expressed publicly to our health agent the concern of misinterpretation, that's good feedback for any type of advisory to be clear on this point. And I do trust our full-time staff department, if that's a concern about misinterpreting jargon, that we can put forth communication that's clear. I have to trust the full-time staff to perform their role. Otherwise, this entire system falls apart if we don't respect these people in these positions.
There's still, in my opinion, going to be business owners out there that you could just bring this that says mask advisory,
Yes?
not mandated, in big bold letters. And they wouldn't read it. They would see mask advisory and, oh, I gotta enforce a mask.
Well, I appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
I think there's, two things with it. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about personal choice, and I think an advisory is informing the public that our cases are going up in the wrong direction. Our positivity positivity rate is going up as well. And I think that we're just letting people know that they need to take caution as they go into public spaces. And on the other side of things, businesses can at any time enforce or do their own mask mandate if they choose to. If supermarkets or any other business chooses to do an individual mandate that people that come into their store have to wear a mask, they can do that on their own. This is an advisory to the public that they should take caution as they enter public spaces.
As Marty, and I asked the question in the beginning, what's the nature of the transmission? If a lot of it is in the household, I would tend to agree with Marty that there's no need for a mask mandate at this point in time.
Yeah.
But that being said, at any point, somebody who is infected may not know and go out into public, and that's the same risk we always carry. Any member of that household may contract it for somebody else to go into the public, and I think that an advisory is a fair mitigation of that, because there's no need to mandate anything in terms of the general public, because that's not where the bulk of the transmission is happening. But I think an advisory is a good step forward in kind of mitigating the potential jump that could result from household transmission. So I would agree on that front. Yes, Melissa?
I just have a question for Marty. If someone in this room pops positive tonight, does that make all of us a close contact regardless of whether we had a mask on or not?
Unless you're vaccinated, unless you are.
I'm so sorry. I'm not able to hear.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's funny. Because you are vaccinated, you do not count as a close contact, and you do not have to quarantine. If you are unvaccinated, we will ask you to quarantine.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? How many of these 92 current cases in Abington as of 12/6 are fully vaccinated?
I'd have to check on that. I can do that and get back
How
to
many
you.
are senior citizens? How many are elder senior citizens?
Public comment is ended. Thank you.
Marty, last week,
The average age is 38, and I can check and get back to you exactly and find out who is vaccinated, who is not. We've provided that number many, many times in all of the emails I've sent. If you want it, I'll give it to you tomorrow.
but I believe it was like 30%, the 30% of the unvaccinated had 70% of the cases in that range. It was.
I don't know that range. I do know that.
I think looking at the data, that's what I saw. I could be mistaken off by a few percentage
Unvaccinated
points.
are 5.8 times more likely to get infected and 14 times more likely to be hospitalized or die.
Mr. Chairman, I'm having public comment discussion.
Excuse me, the board is trying to listen to Marty, and we're having a hard time doing that, so I'm asking that everybody in the room remain silent so we can conduct our business.
And that's
Thank
from
you.
the CDC's website.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Anybody want to take any action?
I'll make a motion to send out a health advisory for a mask advisory based on the current COVID numbers, health. COVID numbers increasing over the past few weeks and a positivity rate over 5%.
I'll second the motion.
All right, so we have a motion from Kevin. Kevin, can you restate your motion?
It would be to put out a mask advisory in public places.
Public places, are you specifying Those public places, or are you just saying in public places?
Public places, indoors,
Indoors.
indoor public
So-
places. I'm sorry, thank you for
I just wanna understand.
leading me to the water.
Okay. That's the whole second.
Yeah, I'll restate, I'll second that motion.
We have discussion from the board on that motion.
Can we add into whatever we send out or put on Facebook or town websites or post on the wall out there that there is still a freedom of choice? There is still a medical and religious exemption to wearing this, as, like I've stated before, some places are then going to mandate in their buildings, which is fine for them. If the owner of a business wants to mandate something, that's fine. But let somebody with a religious exemption or a medical exemption.
I don't know if stating that there needs to be an exemption to an advisory is needed, because it's not a mandate. So if somebody doesn't want to wear a mask, they don't have to. It's just an advisory. So I don't know if that's important to include in the advisory, but
I
that's.
personally think it's important to include in the advisory.
It's not a mandate, it's more of like a public service announcement, as I understand, kind of like saying, hey, we want people who aren't logging into our town website, who aren't following this Excel sheet, to just be aware that we're currently in a period of increased risk. I think that's the intention of it, not to try to force businesses, or actually, I also believe our intention is not to create alarm or try to overreach or try to say, ma'am, I'm really having trouble following this discussion. Please, thank you, ma'am.
I'm having.
Take your mask off.
Were you finished?
We're not doing that. Please remain silent so we can conduct our business. Thank you.
I don't want to interrupt if you weren't finished.
Go ahead.
I don't see the logic of not wanting to. Why send it out then if we're not wanting to?
I think
increase
people know what an
panic?
advisory is. It's not a mandate. You're advised that there's a public health concern.
I'm asking that we remain silent so we can conduct our business. I cannot hear the other members of my board. That is not appropriate.
Next to him, we can hear him.
I think people know what an advisory is. It's,
I'd like to make a motion, sir, for a recess of the board for 10 minutes to calm each down.
I have a motion to recess.
Second.
I have a second from Melissa. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Opposed? All right, we're going to recess for 10 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Time being 7:12. Calling this Board of Health meeting back to order. I don't know what to hit it on. That's why. There we go.
Quincy.
Board of Health meeting back to order at 7:12. Okay. We have a motion on the table from Kevin about a mask advisory in indoor public places, seconded by Christina, and we are in the middle of discussion of that. Going to continue that discussion period at this time. Forward to the board.
To me, this discussion, it has a lot of passion, not only from myself, but the town residents who have taken the time out of their busy lives to come let us know how they feel about this issue. And it's because of that I would like to make a motion to table this discussion, let these numbers sit with us, let us ask the health department for more information on mortality rate and hospital rates, as that plays a factor into this, and come back to it at our next meeting.
Chippy, there's a motion on the floor already.
Yes, there is a motion on the floor already. I believe we need to take the action on that prior to entertain this next motion. So do we have any discussion on the motion that's on the table right now? Hearing no further discussion, I'm going to move to a roll call vote for this, just for the sake of my note-taking in the record as well. So on the motion made by Kevin, Melissa, I'm going to start with you.
No.
No? Andrew?
No.
Kevin?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Motion passes. Okay. Is there any other discussion or action to be taken on this item by the board? Yes.
Can we make sure the advisory is done in all languages that are relevant?
Marty, is that something that's possible?
100%.
Okay. That's something we can do. And do we need to decide on an effective date for this advisory, Marty?
I believe it will be effective as a vote. I can double check with the rules and get back to you, but I'm pretty sure
Okay.
that's it.
For how long?
Yes, that's a very good point. How long is this advisory going to be?
Well, that is a discussion that the board would need to have, I believe, unless there's a opinion that we'd like to voice on that
I
now.
believe it would be as long as we need to, as long as the numbers are elevated and we have a concern for the public health, then the advisory would be in place.
To discuss that point, that makes sense to myself. We already have a procedure where our health department informs us of processes like this, so it can be, a topic for advisement from the health department if not needed anymore.
Marty, is there a number of concern that you would want us to look at?
I don't think it's changed since around the 5%.
No,
threshold.
is 5% just that's the
Well,
good threshold?
I don't think it
we
should
want?
be only 5%. I think we
Right.
shouldn't look at it in a vacuum, as best we can.
Mhm.
It should also deter, like, our vaccination rates and all those things should definitely play a factor. So I would leave that to the board's purview.
I would have no issue as the chair to put this on as a rolling agenda item to review every meeting. We make an advisory today, and when we meet again in 2 weeks, we will look at it again and reevaluate. That's something that is.
I have an issue with that. The last time this was a rolling agenda item is that all these people took the time out of their lives to come here. Next meeting, they take the time out of their lives to come here and we don't discuss it. And they don't come because they came 2 weeks in a row and nothing happened, and that's when we have the conversation about it.
Well, I think the issue with setting a hard number on this is that it's such a fluid situation that for us to sit here and say that in 2 weeks this is all over, that may not be the case based on the numbers, and that's my feeling on it.
My feeling is with the CDC and the Department of Education, and here's the goalpost. And then we get right here on the goalpost and they move it back here, and then we get right here and they move it back here. I personally think we will lose faith with the residents of Abington. I definitely think we need a hard date for how long this will be instituted.
Melissa, did you have a comment?
Yeah, with all due respect, I had suggested the rolling agenda item in the past, and then it just fell off. And I don't know how it just fell off, but so my concern is, when is it put on? How is it put on?
Well,
moving forward.
As the chair who sets the agenda, I think for this particular agenda item, because it's an active advisory, there's no reason that should fall off. I know in the past, because we dipped below that level where we were approaching the 5% is why it began to dip off, because it was no longer an imminent issue that we should discuss. Now we are at that point, and that's why I have suggested that we continue that as a rolling item.
My discussion, contribution for it to be a rolling island, it makes sense to myself because it's active board business. I think the priority when we set our agendas needs to be directed to the efficiency of this board, reviewing topics in a timely manner, an efficient manner, and an organized state. So I think when we're setting our agenda, the Board of Health priority for us to be able to do our business really needs to be our driving influence on what we do or do not set. A reoccurring item to myself in this situation makes sense, since we cannot get a hard end date. It ensures that it doesn't drop off and never becomes addressed, and also keeps it on the board members' radar as something we need to continuously pay attention to. I do understand that the public does want to participate and come to our board meetings, and most welcome to. But I think our board meeting agendas need to be set so the board can be efficient in our role. And that needs to be our rule of thumb.
Is there any other discussion?
I would like to make a motion to put a hard date on this.
Do you want to motion a specific date, or do you want to just motion that?
I'm up
consider?
for a discussion on a date, but I would like to make a motion to put a hard date.
Okay.
So that there's not just a goalpost that keeps getting moved back and moved back.
Since you're not sure, just table it.
I have
Thank you.
I have a
Since you're not sure,
motion.
table it.
I have a motion on the table from Andrew to set a hard date on the advisory. Do I have a second? No second, motion to not continue. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, I will continue this as a rolling agenda item every week for us to reevaluate. And we will continue this discussion based on the available data in 2 weeks as well. Moving on to our next, agenda item, town open meeting laws, board roles training, and board discussion. This is something Christina brought up, and I'm going to turn that over to her for discussion.
So for our board, the reason I wanted to add this is most of us attended or had prior attended our recent open meeting law training, which also covered board roles and responsibilities. During that meeting, some things were insightful to myself regarding like we have best practices from our legal counsel, some of best practices for running agendas, setting agendas, and some specific topics. I personally came away from that meeting with some ideas on how our board has been running and some ideas on what maybe I thought I would like to see different in the future based on that training. So I wanted to add this for a discussion to kind of see where the rest of the board was. If I was the only one that came away from that with ideas on how we should change business, kind of open the floor to other people's thoughts, and just kind of have a discussion. I do have some specific points I wanted to mention, but before I kind of hijack the conversation, I did want to kind of open it up to see if anybody else had something to kind of contribute. So I'm sort of, equally sharing the board here today.
I would suggest you hijack.
Hijack? Okay. Good to hijack? All right. So one of the things from our open meeting law training that came up was boards being more discussion-based. It's been my perception over the last meetings that our boards seem to be very operation-based. Action item, do something. Action item, do something. But from the legal counsel's advisement, these are really the places for discussions to take place. Unfortunately, our discussions seem to be really kind of tense, and the tone tends to be it's not like collaborative or positive. So my vision is I'd like to see our board move forward in the future, that if I have, for example, the body art regulation later tonight, it's more of like a collaborative, positive discussion where we're not like waiting for our turn to object, but that we can also kind of bring up points. And that was sort of my takeaway from that. So I'll kind of pause there to see if anyone has any comment, and then I'll move on to my next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you. I don't like having hard set action items on every single meeting when we can just have a discussion about it. I know we've been faced with some things that have more urgency than others, but I agree, and that's something I want to do more with the board moving forward.
I think too, if you do more like subcommittees on items where you have a few people working on an issue, not obviously a majority, but if you had subcommittees kind of working together, there's like it builds, a good teamwork, but also kind of, I think, builds a better vision for any of the regulations or whatever we're working on.
And I'm going to take that advice when I get to the body art regulation and ask when we get to that agenda point, ask if anyone would like to be on a subcommittee. That's something I did not take away from the open meeting law training, but I agree with you.
I would actually disagree with that statement because those still need to be public meetings.
Right.
Which is what we learned in that. So to have additional public meetings just is a lot more administrative burden.
I think if we're going to get specifically about that, though, we should wait to the body art discussion. But I think I agree with Melissa's ideas that we don't want to. We already talked so much during our meetings about so many different topics that I really don't feel comfortable overwhelming residents with all this information in one meeting when it's stuff that's not urgent. When it's stuff that's not urgent.
Right.
So I don't want to sit here and say we're going to talk about 3 different regulations tonight when they're not urgent things. So to have multiple meetings might be a lot. It's just what I'm getting out there.
So the second thing I took away from our open meeting law training is at one point legal counsel brought up the topic of Facebook pages. There was 2 things that legal counsel presented as best practices and recommendations on how Facebook should be managed by boards. The most striking one to me, and this is from our legal counsel, they recommended allowing public comments was not a best practice. The second part was
was not.
Was not. Yeah, that's just what legal counsel advised. So that was new to myself, and that's not something I was familiar with before the training. The other thing around Facebook that came up is I think I was the one that asked the question about board pages best practices, and legal counsel said it wasn't. And what I took from the training is that if I, Christina, when I have my own Abington Board of Health Facebook account, that was like me because I could represent my own whatevers and manage the information, but having a board page wasn't a best practice because we put one person in a situation where they're representing everybody.
And if I may piggyback on that, the Board of Health page was started because there was no avenue, no constant contact, things like that. And so now that the health department is on Facebook, we have constant contact and those things. I've since deactivated that page.
Oh, very good.
So that is no longer a source of information from the Board of Health. You can get them from the health department or.
So we're in
yeah.
compliance?
Yeah, so that is no
Okay.
longer, that has been deactivated for about a week.
Okay.
So, my question,
Yep.
not best practice, does not mean don't do it. It just means it's not the best practice.
Correct.
Because
Because they don't want to hear from us.
personally, I started my own Andrew King Board of Health Facebook
And
account.
that is a best practice,
Yes,
that
that's
legal said, yeah. You're like completely right there.
Okay, and I stroll through the Abington town pages. I can't remember the last time there was a COVID number update on that. It's just from the health department, get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated. When Alex Haggerty was on this board, I think it was daily updates, and nobody's been doing it, which is why I felt it necessary to start doing it again.
I think, I mean, I haven't seen it, but I think you're working in a best practice situation. You have your own page, you're relaying information to the public, what legal counsel said was fine, so I think you're on point to do that.
So what is the
I mean, listen, there's
not
nothing.
best practice you're talking
Well,
about?
if-
Facebook
if-
pages then?
well, if you're
Having a
talking-
board page, one board
Yeah.
page to rule them all.
If you're talking specifically with COVID numbers, in the past, they were always available on the website. It was just a cut and paste from the website. So those numbers were not ever not available. They were just not easily accessed on Facebook all the time. But they were always available. And Alex did a great job of making sure that stuff got done. But, you know, we're just people that are volunteering our time to do these things. And if we don't have a second to cut and paste it onto Facebook, that's just kind of what we ran into. But the health department did have it available.
Isn't that not part of our job is to inform the residents of Abington?
Yes, but not, Facebook isn't a requirement. Those things are available, and they aren't public. But I can't hear my board, thank you. Those things are available, and that's really what it comes down to. It's not like we're hiding anything. That stuff is available. It's just not out on Facebook.
In this day and age, though, Facebook is where, I can't tell you
I
how many
100%
people I
agree
know,
with
the
you.
only way I talk to them is on Facebook.
Oh, but
and
you
that
still
would be-
can. You're fine. If you have your own individual, like Andrew Board of Health Facebook page, you're fine.
I'm asking why everyone sitting at this table doesn't have one.
Oh,
That's-
well, me for myself, I'm not on Facebook, as simple as that. It's a personal choice.
Okay, that's fine, I'm just,
Yeah, that's my reason. I think what I was speaking to more is not, and this was the best practice, not having a singular board Facebook page, because let's say I'm in charge of the board's Facebook page, and I post something that Kevin doesn't like. Well, now I am inadvertently assuming he agrees with what I'm posting. And, I mean, you already deleted
Yeah,
it because you
exactly.
did the same training I did.
Yeah, no, because I agree with the best practice, and that was
Yeah.
I think the best move. But we all have our own, if we want to have our own individual pages, I think that's what the root of what we're getting at. Andrew, if that's information you want to share, I do encourage it. I agree that Facebook is a good resource for that thing. It's just that as a Board of Health, certain information, it's not an ignorance thing that we don't want to share it or that we don't care. It's just a matter of it just didn't happen. It wasn't a requirement. It didn't happen.
And
So-
might I point out, the Board of Health is a regulatory body, and our role and responsibility is the regulations of, for like public health for the town of Abington. It's actually not our responsibility to, for example, go to the businesses and do licenses myself, nor to do contact tracing, nor to report these numbers. role and responsibility is actually for the full-time health department. So I'm kind of like putting myself in a situation where I'm taking another department's information and I'm like posting it out. But like the main responsibility, I believe, for communicating to the town is our full-time staff. And our main responsibility as a board is regulatory in nature. So for myself, I try to stick, and this is my own comfort level, every board member needs to make their own thing, but for myself, I try to stick within the role of my responsibilities focused on regulation, so. But that's my choice. I'm talking a lot, so I'll be quiet now.
Do we have further discussion on the Facebook page matter? Christina, you
And then final point from their OML training. One thing that was interesting to me from legal is that we can coordinate logistics between meetings. I have in the past added logistics things to our agenda items and literally like let things go, wait for our agenda, and then discuss them because I didn't want to violate open meeting law. But what we are permitted to do is exchange information. I can, for example, if I have a regulation, I can exchange information on like drafted changes so it's more timely than like, hey, we came to a meeting, here's a spreadsheet. I cannot say, here's my regulations, send me your feedback during meetings. So what I was hoping as a board is for us, not just myself, but for us to feel all more comfortable exchanging logistical information so that we can be timely and we don't have to do like stop and start between like our board meetings every time there's a logistical snafu. And that was all I had to say about that.
I do appreciate working out logistical things ahead of time. I mean, I think it just makes the meeting more efficient, so I'm always open to chat about that. That's not an issue. And Marty's been great helping me with logistical things, need things printed, information, things like that. He's been great support, so that for sure. Thank you, Christina. Is there any discussion, further discussion on this on the board?
No.
Hearing none? Okay. Thank you. All right, so we move on now to our old business and our final section, which is the body art regulations. Again, this is Christina has suggested this on the agenda.
So this is a follow-up to the initial suggested modifications from our last meeting. Two things I wanted to do today is I wanted to have a discussion with the board on how the workflow of this regulation review is going to go, so everyone's informed. I personally didn't like the way this went last meeting. I came with a spreadsheet, I ran through it super quick. I just feel like there's a better way to do business, so I'm going to try to do that in the future. This is how I see the workflow and how we do this regulation as a board going. First, as primary, getting board consensus on all the points for review. That's not a vote. That's not like, hey, section 1, do we vote and approve? That's merely me as an example saying, hey guys, on the section 1 change, do we have consensus? I know from our last discussion, there's some cases that don't have consensus, and that's fine. It just means that as a board, we need to discuss that and collaborate on those specific points. After we get through all the various sections and we get consensus on changing, the next step is to complete a finalized draft. Now that's also not something we're going to vote on because my intention is that we take the draft, put it into a PDF, and contact the 3 currently licensed body art establishments in Abington and say, hey, listen, the board has taken time, we've reviewed this, we have a rough draft, we would like you, a practitioner licensed in the state that, or I'm sorry, the town that this affects, please look through our draft and give us feedback. What have we forgotten? Where are we wrong? Where has Christina misspelled the autoclave machine because she's never seen one yet? And then also invite those practitioners to attend a board meeting. Now I did speak to those the body art establishments, and I did let them know if you get this from me, because I don't know how long it's going to take to get there and you don't have time, it's okay to reply back and say, hey, I'm not going to have time to come to the next board meeting to table this, because there's no one coming, there's nothing immediate happening in body art right now, there's no deadline, so it's better to just table it so that those establishments have time to review. In addition to inviting the body art establishments to provide feedback on the draft, I'm also going to formally invite the health department as well. Marty kind of organically keeps up as we're going, but if Marty is slammed and doesn't have time or can't be here for a meeting, I don't want the health department feeling like they only have one shot to talk about this. So just like the body art establishments, I'm gonna like pretend Marty's not here. And also when we get a draft from the board, send it to the body art establishments and the health department and say, hey, bring us feedback. And try to give them at least 2 weeks to go through changes. Hopefully, they'll bring us feedback. We'll take the feedback. We'll revise as needed. We'll ask questions on some of these technical points that maybe just don't make sense to us unless anyone here is a tattoo artist I don't know about. And after getting their feedback, we'll go through, try to get a final consensus, and at that point, the board will vote. So that's kind of like the workflow as I see it, so we can be efficient, we can make sure everybody's included, and that we're not like kind of stopping and starting. So I said I'd be a fan of discussion. So how does the board members kind of feel about that workflow? Is that good? Is that bad? Do you want to see something different?
I want to hear Aaron's take first.
So the big thing that I'm just in general trying to wrap my head around is our objective with this is, maybe that's not the way I want to word that, but we're going to go through and we're going to look at the way that things are defined in these regulations. And I still don't think we have an answer if we know why the template was defined the way that it was. And my only concern moving forward with some of this stuff is that if most other communities have accepted the template as their standard, that we're asking guest practitioners, new practitioners that come into town, they have a different definition in Abington than everywhere else. That's just one concern that I have moving forward with some of this stuff.
Okay, that's fair.
That if we can maybe just think about our approach from that, it's not just making sure that we have the best regulations, but ones that agree with our surrounding communities so that we don't have differing standards.
Right. So
I don't want to be the one that stands out and has a higher or lower standard than everybody else. I don't think there's a need for that in Abington. I think that if we try to, be in line with our other communities, that's going to be what's most important.
And that makes sense. Pardon me. And that makes sense to me as well. As I've been going through these, I have some personal contacts out of the town of Abington. I've been asking for feedback. By design, I didn't involve any of our in-town people because I don't want to be unfair where one person's overly involved, another person's not, and it seems like one establishment in town gets, first in, they get the authority. So I've been trying to thoughtfully go through these to make sure actual practitioners from other towns have some feedback. But out of fairness, I wanted to make sure the currently licensed establishments all got the rough draft at the same time, so they each had equal opportunity.
Andrew, you have a comment?
Yes, so the whole thing with being similar to other towns. Hypothetical here, you have master practitioner, means a specifically identified individual with at least 5 years experience in the field of body art and minimum 2 years as a body art practitioner permitted by the health department. So say I work at the state level and determine this. You work for Rockland, you adopt it. You work for Whitman, you adopt it. Kevin works in Abington and is going to adopt it because of the state adopted it in all the surrounding towns. I know tattoo artists that have been doing tattoos for 20 years and have no clue what they're doing.
And I think that's kind of what we're talking about, trying to help standardize this so it makes sense to people.
I think that it should be more Abington specific, have the 3 shops in town be part of it, like you said. And because in all honesty, I know you were saying you don't know much about tattoos. I have tattoos.
I do too, sir.
You said you don't know much about
I
it.
have not tattooed anyone, sir. Having a
Okay.
product and being
So
a
you
practitioner are different things.
That is a little bit of splitting hairs there, but whatever.
So
I have tattoos. I don't know what it takes to do this. I can't say, oh, this person has to have 5 years to be able to train somebody, a master practitioner.
So I agree that there are probably things in here that we need to look at that are specific to Abington. I'm talking specifically about definitions, because definitions, I think, some of these things really shouldn't change from community to community. If we're defining one thing one way and a town's defining it another way, well, it doesn't matter what the body of the regulation says. If we're defining these things differently, then the practices I don't think work together
Mhm.
from community to community. So I'd just be concerned if we try to deviate too much in our definitions before moving into everything else, that we may not be consistent with our other communities, so that practitioners that want to come here need to learn a whole new vocabulary.
What I can
The
do-
other communities are not gonna be affected by what we do, only our tattoo shops.
At least that's my concern.
I personally went out and spoke with, didn't bring any Board of Health paperwork on it, just wanted to get opinions and ask them to come to this meeting, to have a voice in this regulation. And they said every single town is different.
Right, the tattoo regulations don't have a federal or state level standard, and it is left up to each town to try to define it. So to your point, yes, we can be very specific for Abington. To Aaron's point, and maybe this is the middle ground, while making these changes, because we're gonna ask for consensus. I can do this on my side. Aaron, you can do this on your side, because honestly, the more people looking at this, the better. We can vocalize as we're getting consensus. An example of just the workflow would be like this. I would say, hey, listen, blah, 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 autoclaving. And then Melissa would say, hey, I don't have consensus on this topic, and here's why. It does not match the towns of Hanover, Hingham, and Cambridge. And that's why I don't want to change it. And at that point, our board wouldn't have consensus on that item, and we would discuss that point until I hope we gained consensus. So that's a way we can kind of.
If I may make a suggestion, maybe, that similar to how we had the fee schedule, we have all the other towns, numbers on there. Maybe this is something we get, 2 or 3 other surrounding community definitions, and we just sit here and have that comparison when we go to have this discussion. Just that way, I think we can take in the local
Right.
perspective as well as what the suggested changes are, so we don't deviate too far
Right.
off course.
Would
Um,
we be comfortable if I were to acquire the South Shore towns definitions? And that's something as we can exchange information and provide to this board before our next meeting. I mean, it might be, I don't know how far we want to go with different
I'd say
towns.
it'd be pretty cumbersome to,
Maybe we pick a county, maybe we do our current county as a way to kind of,
29 towns, so that's a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I personally was thinking, there's 5 towns that surround us, just
Yeah.
two
I agree with that.
of them, 3 of us, 3 of them would.
Yeah.
I'm not
okay.
saying we go for an extensive list of every single one in the community, but I just want us to be, somewhat in line with what other communities are doing, and at least consider that.
that makes sense.
I'm not saying that what we're gonna put in the regulation is going to be the thing that every other community does, but I just wanted to have it available to us so that we can use that as a resource.
Yeah, that makes sense. Does that help everyone else kind of on our board if we were to acquire our bordering towns
Yeah, I think that makes
regulations and we can use that as a resource for comparison?
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I would be okay with using it as an individual comparison, but to make it like a board thing where, okay, they have master practitioner as this is their definition, why don't we use that and vote on that? I think that should be how I'll take, Rockland and ours. Be
Right.
like, okay, I think, 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
Yeah, well, that's why I suggest kind of like the fee schedule, because we have, maybe Braintree's 200 for something, but Rockland's 75 for a certain thing. We can sit there and just make that judgment based on maybe those differences. But I think just having that resource available is going to be helpful, because I would like to see why the things are defined the way they are, but I don't think we have access to that information without maybe reaching out to town council, and at that point they're inferring as well. But if we have kind of see what other towns have done, then we can kind of see where we have the room to start to change those definitions if needed. So,
And the way I'm going to run through the regulation, it's literally going to be like, hey, number one, do we have consensus on the board? And, I'll use this as an example, it's like the master practitioner, Andrew, that's where you would say, hey, no consensus. And that means like, okay, we need to have a discussion, and you would be able to vocalize and say, look, I know every other town, I'm making stuff up by the way, every other town uses master practitioner, but I have spoken to X, Y, and Z, and this actually hurts our small towns and adds undue regulation. That's my logic for not wanting it. And then there would be like a discussion where I'd say, well, Andrew, I disagree, and you'd present. And the goal of the discussion is we come to consensus about like, okay, after exchange of ideas, how we try to find a middle ground.
I'm gonna make a suggestion, maybe instead of, I think maybe we should look at this at our next meeting with that information in hand. I'm not saying that one of these needs to get put together, maybe we just have a copy of 2 other surrounding communities' regulations, because the definitions are the first 2 pages, 3 pages generally. And then from there, I think we can cross-reference those, just having that available. Because I don't think it's a good idea to have one specific board member go through and try and cut these things out. Let's just have the whole document and use it then. Maybe that's something we can just, Marty, I could ask the board, the health department just to send out to the board, 2 other communities. And
There is also precedent for involving the practitioners in the design of these regulations. This update was specific to a new practitioner needing a specific thing in town, and
you're referring to the guest practitioner update.
Well, that and something else specifically too. Like, we should lean on the subject matter experts.
Right, and I do want to formally involve the current practitioners and the health department. For the sake of, if you get too many cooks in the kitchen, you just can't get anything done. I would like the board to at least compile a rough draft, so that when we do involve the practitioners, we're handling them a complete, hey, listen, this is based on what we've seen, here's the old one, and it's not a matter of our practitioners showing up to every meetings as we go through section by section by section, and them having to run back and research everything. So it's more for efficiency, so we can get a draft together, but also efficiency for them. We volunteered for this job. They are full-time and sometimes working 2 jobs, staff, that I don't want them to feel if they don't show up to every single board meeting and doing the draft, they're going to be left out and not have a say. And when I talk about having a say, I really do mean, here's our rough draft, we plan to meet on this day. If it's not enough time for yourself, we'll table it, we'll extend time, and we're going to respond to like their feedback. So.
My question, this packet on the body art that was in our packets from last week that I'm referring to, is this the current regulation, the one we're going to be going over?
Yes, this is the one that
Yes.
has the most recent update on the guest practitioner section, which is section 12.
Mm-hmm.
So this is in a rough draft updated version.
Well, this
No,
is
sir.
this is
No,
the
this is the
this is the
official
currently adopted version. I think we adopted that back in October.
Okay.
So this is the most up to date copy.
So if the new licensee is trying to get a body art license and they go to our website, that's the resource they can access right now and they can see it. But
Okay.
this kind of like, cross out this, add this word, this we're gonna like compose like a rough draft amongst the board, get finalized, and then say, hey, this was the old one, this is the new one. I've done regulation reviews where there's been multiple drafts flying, and these things can stretch out for 6 months because of all the cooks in the kitchen. So my goal is to try to make this efficient without wasting, just wasting time.
Okay. Did you say something about tabling this tonight? Because
I mean, I didn't make any formal motion, but that would be my suggestion until we can compile just some more information, like I was mentioning, maybe, and
Looking at the other
then
towns in the
continue
area.
that.
Make the motion.
I would prefer not to make the motion
Oh,
as chair,
okay.
but
I'll make a motion.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was
I'll
a
make a
thing.
motion to table.
I have a
Tonight.
motion from Kevin to table discussion. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll actually second that motion. I think that's a really poignant point, and I agree.
So I have a motion from Kevin to table the discussion. I have a second from Christina. Do I have any discussion?
yeah, I have a huge issue with it, as there is people in the audience tonight that came here for this. That packet that you have, Christina,
Yes.
is that the definitions one we went over last week?
Yes, this is what I put on the public record for the board, because I said, these are the things in section 1 or 2 that I've already looked at. But I was trying to like supply it to the board to give you guys a heads up.
But that hasn't even been put into draft form.
No, sir, this is just my
So-
recommended suggestions that we would then say
Right.
for consensus, to say, hey, do we agree, do we not agree, do we need to discuss?
And as she stated, any process before we got to the point of voting on it, that we would circulate it with the current practitioners in town.
Yes, the whole draft, not in this format,
Right.
because this is just not easy to use for a normal person.
Right.
It would be like Andrew, what you have, it would be like that, and it would be like really clear. It'd be like, this is the draft the board's reviewing.
And then you would highlight the new
Yeah.
additions,
Like
regulations.
the track changes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because you don't want somebody having to go through like this. It's just, unless you're gonna give them a prescription for Advil at the same
Exactly.
time.
For the previous iterations, we've given it to the board in a track changes with all of them side by side or
Mhm.
highlighted
Right.
different colors.
Yeah, and this is going to be a long process, especially if we're going section by section. We're gonna need town council to review things. It
Yeah.
will be a while before I think even a draft is gonna come out of this, just because of the amount of discussion we need to have on the content here.
Right.
And that's just from my experience in the past, us making and reviewing regulations. So I understand, you know, the maybe people that came tonight for specifically this, you know, issue, but I don't think that it's going to be a while, I think, before we get to some place that is a little more concrete to take an actual vote. At least that's my understanding of the nature of how we've been
Right, I
conducting
mean,
this.
regulation review is, like I feel, as our board, our primary responsibility, you know, is the regulation reviews of the town. So for myself, I realize it's gonna take a long time, but these things probably should, because these are the regulations that might not get updated in 10 years, and they do directly impact, you know, small business owners. Maybe just 3, but these are small business owners or large business owners in our community, so.
The last 2 times we've updated this very specific regulation has been actually at the request of our establishments in town. I believe one was for microblading, which is a type of makeup, cosmetic tattoo, and the second time was for the guest practitioner coming in town.
Mhm.
So we have a long history of,
Bothering them?
yeah.
I'm sorry. I know, and I was the dissenting vote on the last time the regulation came, because quite frankly, I felt when I looked at the regulation, at that time, I didn't feel comfortable. I was well versed in what I was voting for. So as the person that was the dissenting vote, I kind of spearheaded as the board member, okay, if I'm gonna say I don't like this, I'm gonna take the ownership of like, well, I'm gonna be the person that's gonna try to make it better. So I guess I'm defending myself, but that is the board's job, It's
Not necessary.
all right,
Just have an issue tabling this as we went through a couple of pages of definitions last week. We talked about this week that what we're gonna do, and that's it.
And we don't have a written document that we could actually approve tonight.
I'm
Even-
not asking to vote, I'm saying, well, let's talk about not just these definitions. Does anybody have any issues with exemptions or restrictions, you know?
Well, I agree that those are really important things to get to, but I think the intention was to go section by section, and we haven't passed the definition section yet of this. And quite frankly, to Christina's point, I would have to agree that if we don't agree on the definitions, then we're not going to agree on how the rest of this goes. So if we can get past this point, then I think that's when the content of the regulation is gonna be important. But quite frankly, I don't think we're ready to have that discussion yet until we get past this section. And that's my opinion.
but plan of action, we get our neighboring towns' regulations, we supply it to our board members, we all have a working document. Please know, as the board, it's not limited, so if there's something missing from here, and I think that's really where our most critical problem is, something that's missing that like we might not be aware of, and like a process or a procedure, and I think that's where our body, our establishments are gonna be really helpful. They're gonna say, hey, it's really great, you have this autoclave machine that has been used in 10 years, you need to have this bio waste hazard machine. I lost my point, so I'll stop talking.
How would we go about involving the shops in town? Would we get these definitions from the other towns? Are
So,
we able to go
Well,
right out to
Can I
them?
make a recommendation?
I was gonna say, I haven't been
I
involved
think-
with this as chair, so if Marty
I
can comment.
think that getting a draft that you are all comfortable with, even if it is like the first of many drafts that you are like comfortable sharing with the practitioners in town, taking it to them and asking them their feedback, and then allowing them to talk about that feedback in this setting,
Mhm.
so that you know exactly what that feedback is and where they're coming from with that, and then accepting or, you know, discussing that feedback and those changes in that regulation with the actual experts. That makes sense.
and that's the workflow that, you know, I'm proposing for this. We'll get board consensus first, we'll create a rough draft, we'll give the rough draft to the health department and the body art establishments, allow them ample time to review and provide feedback. We'll take their feedback under advisement, we'll finalize our draft after the advisement, and at that point, the board will vote. So that's kind of the thing. I think it's probably better if maybe our next meeting, I also come with like a kind of workflow on like where we're planning to do this, because I do think sometimes visualizing is a lot easier than like orally explaining.
Is that something that can get sent in an email prior to the meeting?
Yeah, so if,
I just feel
Yeah,
like.
right?
I agree with that point heavily. If there's something that's gonna be shared, like a document, if we can get that sent out, just no comments on the email, but just we have that information. I don't think it's appropriate for board members to walk in and just get handed a document that they don't expect to get, so if we can.
Yeah, I agree.
If there's something that, you wanna share with the board, please do so, but just make sure it's opinions are stayed out of that.
Okay.
I would also like to send a copy of those definitions that we went over last week to the shops ahead of time, because we agree on definitions, we get a draft going, we bring them in, and we mess something up on a definition that's circling back right to the very
Yeah, well, and
beginning. I'd like
agree,
to have them
yeah.
in
I
every
disagree.
step of the way, so we do it once and we do it right.
Well-
Andrew, I disagree. It's just not efficient workflow for regulation review. It'll stretch a process that might already take 3 months out to 6 or 7.
Well, I actually agree with Andrew's point that I don't think that this is the sheet of paper that needs to go to body art regulations, but I think once we establishments, excuse me, I think once we finally nail down what those definitions are, that's what we need to ask the experts, because it's going to affect the rest of the regulation if there's no consensus among the people that are experts in us. And I know it may not be conducive to the best workflow, but I feel like we do need to include them in the conversation as best as possible.
Here's what I'll ask. I don't want to burn out the full-time employees by going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So when we get consensus on the definitions, I'll request from this board, reach out to them once, make sure at this point we're on the same page, but let us not be bugging these people trying to make money every single time, because we know we're going to be sending them a large PDF at one point and asking them for, a full review. And they will have that opportunity to provide feedback. But I've done regulation review where you've reached out to someone for every little thing, and quite frankly, what organically happens, those people's eyes get glazed over and they stop being involved. And we really need them to be involved. They're experts and are the most important part of this process. I want us to take the administrative legwork and the burden. I want us to do the research. I want us to ask the questions. I want us to learn what an autoclave system is. And I want us to take the brunt of this work and let the experts be in a position of being an expert advising, not cleaning up our mess that we have the access to figure out on our own. So I feel strongly about this, but I think we're circling the conversation now.
Let me just make sure I'm getting this right. We want to hammer down what the definitions are and then ask the professionals their input on the definitions?
That's my feeling. I think the board will vote on that particular matter, whether we want to send that out or not. That's how I would like to see it happen. To Christina's point, I don't want to burn people out. Maybe that's something we need to define in the next meeting or so, is, where are the points where we want to send this out? Rather than, we're not doing it after every section, because that'll be 15 times we gotta bug these people. That's a discussion we'll need to have.
That's fine.
Okay.
Definitions especially. I feel like half of our work in definitions could be handled in a couple of seconds by sending an email to these professionals and then telling them, oh, this is not industry standard. This is not how this works anymore. This worked 20 years ago, but not now. You know what I mean?
Listen, I do understand, but some of these definitions, and this might be a time where we go through these definitions and then make a decision where to involve them, because some of these definitions, for example, are words like contaminated waste that are defined by CMR regulation. Some of it is words like bloodborne pathogens. So I guess I kind of wonder, if we get through the definitions, if maybe the comfort level of moving forward might be in a different place. But how about this? Can we get through the definitions next meeting? And then as a agenda item next meeting, after we're through the definitions, kind of get a consensus if at that time we want to tag the body art establishments or not? Because at that time we'll have more information.
I disagree with that.
I think we should make a decision after we get through the definitions, when we're all more informed on what we're actually talking about. If you haven't had
Uh,
a chance to go through these yet,
That's not what I'm saying, Christina. What I'm saying is, I have taken the time to go through these. I have taken the time to speak with the shop owners in town.
I
I
know.
would like to inform them and have them be part of us doing the definitions.
Melissa, I want to let you give your comment and then we can.
Thank you. It's my understanding we might have a shop owner in tonight. Would you be willing to open the floor to her for public comment if she's interested?
Yeah, if,
Not owner, but I do all the paperwork and.
sure, if you have a comment on this, I'd welcome that.
Yeah.
You're more welcome to come up.
No, just, I feel like your way could be a waste of time. I would like to be involved in the entire process, just, I feel like,
okay.
I agree with what you were saying.
And you have in the past.
What?
You've been involved in the previous regulation.
Yes,
It's gonna sound silly. Which shop are you at?
Tiger Shark Tattoos.
Okay, I'm learning the different people, so I'm starting to learn
Yeah.
how to place them.
I'm the shop girl, microblading artist, and I'm an apprentice right now. So I'm very involved with all the paperwork.
I would like to, when we do the involvement, you're
I could be at your disposal. I
at a
would like to
very
be involved.
unique position inside of your shop, that the owner isn't always the one handling all the paperwork, isn't the one handling all the medical waste and all that. If we could include the person, not just the owner, but the person.
Yeah, the owner is not involved in it. Like, I do all of that 100%.
So would,
I would like to be involved.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Would this maybe be the course of action we want to take if we want to try and get through definitions next meeting, that we invite all the sharps to have a representative here as we go through these and be a part of this discussion? Is that something we could do?
I would like to do the invitation to the owners as the person spearheading it, and I would like the collaboration with our establishments to be managed and coordinated with this board. I don't think us as individuals working in silos on this project will benefit our board. I think we get more work done being collaborative.
Yes.
I'd like it to come from Erin as the chair, with all due respect, Christina.
That sounds fine.
Well, so that's personally how I'd like to see it function. If we want to get through definitions, I think we should have those parties here. And even if it's just we're going through it, we can ask the questions real time.
Okay.
If we can at least make that invitation for our next meeting.
Is that something that needs a motion to do?
I don't believe so, but if in the interest of protecting ourselves, I would entertain
Well, the
one.
chair has the,
Yeah. So,
yeah, the chair can.
long, short, no, I don't think it does, but.
You have discussion on the agenda.
So, if I can ask the health department to help me reach out to those establishments, have them come to our next meeting, we can continue our discussion on the definitions with the other regulations in hand as well. We have plenty of material and resources at our disposal then, I think, to have that discussion.
And I do ask other board members, just for the sake of printing, please kindly bring this document to our next meeting, because I'm going to run out of printer ink, and if you need it reprinted or emailed to you, just let me know. I just didn't want to reprint it again tonight.
That's the document where you have the current.
The one I handed out last meeting? Yeah.
Yes,
If you've lost it, it's not a
that-
big deal, just ask me and I'll
If you need
send
it,
it.
if you need a copy, we can print them out here.
Okay.
Okay, so that is the packet that you printed out at the last meeting and gave to us that has the current definition for it, the new definition, and your reasoning behind it?
Yes.
It has the original
Thank you.
content, the suggested modification, and the rationale, to be clear in the jargon, Andrew.
That's
So,
what I
so
just
yes,
asked.
that is the document that, it'll be, and if you need an extra copy, Marty would be happy. Is that something we can make public too, because it is public record?
Yeah.
Okay. So Marty, if that's something we can just get attached somewhere, just so that when we do have this discussion, it's available, that'd be great. There is a motion on the floor that has been seconded to table this discussion. Do I have any more discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? It's unanimous. This discussion is tabled to our next meeting, and I will lay it out as I just mentioned a moment ago.
All right.
That is all the business on our agenda. Do I have a
Aaron?
motion? Yes.
I'd like to recognize Allison Sullivan, our state rep, and the selectman, Alex Haggerty, for being here and listening in to the important conversations here tonight. And Aaron, I just ask if you're willing to open public comment back to them.
Yeah, that's fine. If there's any more public comment.
I know it's getting late, so I will be very, very brief. I want to thank the board for hosting this meeting this evening. I know it's not always an easy decision like many of you, I've been dealing with this pandemic for almost 2 years now. It will be 2 years in a couple of months. I've worked very closely with Marty in the health department, and I do want to recognize the work that Marty and Lindsay Wright and the whole health department have done throughout this whole entire pandemic, and the board itself. I know that a lot of things that people don't see is what Lindsay and Marty do when they're either physically here or not physically here, and they go above what their requirements are. And I'm not going to speak to a person's, interaction with Marty. I know my interaction has always been something positive, and he just wants what's best for the town. That being said, I also am in support of a no mask mandate in the sense that, Andrew, I'm sorry, nice to meet you, proposed that there was a sunset clause on an advisory for the mask. And being someone who has dealt with mask mandates in the schools and having to answer to constituents throughout the districts regarding the pushback every single time, there's one date set and then there's a new date set with little to no input from the public. You were able to get some input tonight, and I did miss a little bit of it, and I do apologize, I ran late. I just would ask the board if they can think about what that sunset clause looks like. I know it's not a mandate and it's an advisory, but sometimes when people hear advisories, they think mandates. So that's kind of my opinion. I think people are doing their part most of the time when it comes to masking and or vaccinations, but I do want to recognize the hard work that the health department has done over the past 2 years. So thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Allison.
Having completed our agenda items, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
I have a motion to adjourn by Christina. I have a second from Kevin. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We are adjourned at 8:05.